views about Bill Shorten's conduct today. Now, we're going to go back to the city of Townsville because travelling with the Prime Minister today is the Infrastructure Minister, Darren Chester. He's been there to oversee the announcement in relation to the local rail project in what's a fairly important seat for the Coalition to defend. But Darren Chester, closer to home, there's trouble with dairy in Victoria. When can troubled farmers there expect any form of relief, or is any coming from your government?
Well, can I say, first of all, Greg, you're right, this is a terrific announcement in Townsville, $150 million for a new rail project. But in relation to the dairy industry, my electorate of Gippsland obviously has about 23% of Australia's total dairy production comes from my electorate. I've had the weekend to talk to many people in Gippsland, to talk to representatives from the industry, and there's a great deal of concern, obviously, about the impact of these the drop in the market price, which is having a flow-on effect right through the industry. Can I say that the Minister himself has spent a lot of time already talking with representatives from the industry, talking with retailers, making sure we understand exactly the extent of the problem, and then trying to work our way through to ensure we can help them into the future. Now, there are some things in place already. There's household assistance in place for people to keep food on the table for them if they're particularly struggling at this difficult time. There's access to concessional loans, which are good initiatives, they're things that can help. But in terms of longer term issues, we're still working through some of those.
And is there a timetable on some of those measures you just outlined there? Concessional loans, rural councillors, access to farm household support. Can that be expected before July or later? It sounds like the need is fairly immediate. Well,
that's right, Greg. Those programs through the normal assistance packages that are available through the department are ongoing and available. So the Minister for Agriculture has made those announcements. But look, more generally, the challenge we have is obviously some very short-term issues here in terms of the impact on individual farmers and their household incomes. But the longer-term outlook for the dairy industry in Australia, I think, is still quite positive. We've negotiated 3 free trade agreements which provide access to markets in Asia where there's a growing demand for dairy into the future. So we need to be optimistic and positive about the future, because I think the dairy industry in Australia does have a great future. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we're working now, the Minister for Agriculture is working with local communities, working with the state ministers involved to try and come up with a package that actually achieves something. We've got to make sure that we're not just dabbling in this space and not actually helping anyone. So it's not an easy issue. It's not necessarily an issue that governments could necessarily always be directly involved in, because we're talking about a market drop. We're talking about some situations that have occurred offshore, not actually in Australia at all. So there's some big challenges there for us. But we do have the support of the two ministers, both the Victorian State Minister and the Federal Minister, and the industry is actively engaged in talking to the Minister on a daily basis, and they've certainly been talking to me as a local member for Gippsland.
As you say, market fluctuation, world price movements are a big part of this story, but so too, the suggestions being made publicly is the conduct of executives, particularly with Goulburn Murray. Do you lay the feet of blame for them over some of the events that have unfolded in the last 6 to 12 months?
You're right. There is a complex equation in play here, and I think there are some questions that the Murray-Goulburn Cooperative and Fonterra as well need to answer in terms of the treatment of farmers as the market prices have dropped, not informing them fully of the risk to their income, and whether or not they're fully informed and be able to make those informed decisions about the cost structure of their businesses over the last few months. Now, farmers went on throughout the Christmas period right through to the last couple of weeks, still investing very heavily in their farms, thinking they were going to achieve a price which is much higher than the end price ended up being. So whether or not there could have been more information provided to the farming families in my electorate and across Australia is a question I think needs to be answered. And we need to learn from these sort of situations. If this is a situation we can avoid into the future, what can we do to try and level out some of the bumps in the dairy industry? I think Murray-Goulburn was on the right path in terms of trying to move away from being just a commodity business and having branded products, selling at a higher value into Asian markets. I think they're on the right path with that. Now, whether their forecasts were too heroic, whether they were paying or giving farmers a false sense of comfort for a period of months is something that I think needs to be properly investigated. But generally speaking, my concern, my thoughts, my interest is in the farming families in Gippsland, in Western districts, communities in the seat of Murray, in the Goulburn Valley area, where people are doing it pretty tough right now. And I just say to them, go and get some financial advice. If you're feeling like there's some emotional or mental health issues, make sure you go and get that help. We're very good in our regional communities of getting around our mates when we're in trouble, so it's important that we get around our mates now, put an arm around them, have a word to them, talk to them, work your way through these issues. And the government itself, I think, does have some responsibilities, and the Minister accepts that in trying to find ways that we can help as well. But I just simply say we've got to get around our mates at these difficult times.
So just to reiterate, and I suppose to recap where we started, Darren Chester, a lot of those programs you're referring to there exist currently and can be accessed, but are you suggesting that over and above those current schemes, the government may yet have a bit more to say?
Oh, absolutely, and I've had some discussions with Barnaby Joyce, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Agriculture, as you would expect I would. I mean, I've got a lot of farming families I know very personally and in my electorate directly impacted by this. So I've had those conversations with Barnaby, and we're trying to work our way through what is it that governments can actually do that's actually going to provide some genuine assistance and making sure that our farming families are there for when the market prices recover. So one of the challenges in the dairy industry in particular is the high input costs. We need to try and work with them to find ways to structure their farming businesses so they can reduce their costs in this difficult time, so that they're ready to capitalise on the higher prices when they inevitably return. Because I've got absolute confidence in the future of the dairy industry in Australia. We've got access through the free trade agreements negotiated by Andrew Robb. We've got access to some of the biggest markets in the world. The Asian appetite for dairy is growing. So I think we've got every reason to be confident about the longer term future, but we need to get over this hump. We need to help families get over this hump and make sure they're in a position to capitalise when better times return.
All right, Darren Chester, with one eye on your local electorate in Gippsland and the other on your national campaigning duties, we'll leave it there from Townsville. Thank you.
All the best.
All right, so that's Darren Chester, the Infrastructure Minister, who is in North Queensland and travelling with the Prime Minister, so presumably moving off to another destination before too long.